Well, I'm going to make a sleeve board knife, which is the most commonest pen and pocket knife that used to be made 50 years ago in the cutlery trade. But the first thing you've got to do in making a knife is you've got to make the templates to make the individual knife you're making. So you make a prototype knife, and then you knock it to pieces and you make steel templates to each part. There's a pocket blade for the knife. That's what they call a pocket blade. There's a pen blade, which it's called a pen blade because in the old days it was made for cutting quills on pens. So it still kept its name. We still refer to it as a pen knife. And then you've got the spring, which is the back of the knife, which operates the two blades. It's got to be hardened and tempered to the proper temperatures. And then you've got a brass lining, with two brass linings for one knife, which is the main frame of the knife. And then you've got the outer scale, which could be buffalo horn or stag horn, pearl, ivory, whatever the customer wanted. And then basically those are the main materials. Of course, if it was a knife with a lot of parts in, you'd have scissors and button hooks and files and screwdrivers and tin openers and whatever.
Yeah.
Well, before I make the sleeve board knife, I'm making all the parts for them. So I'm going to cut a brass lining, which I do with a pair of tin snips. I've got to turn it around because the jaws of the snips are not very long, so I can't go to the right to the end. So I've got to join it up in the middle and cut it off like that. And then I just strain it up a little bit. And I get my main template and I put it on the brass in the centre so that it clears all round, or a little bit round the edge to file off when I put all the holes in the proper place. So I've got to put that in my vise now and mark the holes through the template. To do the marking, I've got to put a breastplate on, which is an old-fashioned piece of metal with little holes in, and this is what they call a fiddle bow, which is like what it is, a fiddle bow. And it's got a piece of, well, that is pigskin. There's a lot of give in pigskin, so when you twist it around the bobbin, it gives way. So when you put this little point in the hole in your breastplate, that it revolves. Take it out of the vise and it's marked, the brass lining, with the holes, what will be in the proper place, because through the main template. So
Okay.
just get Now I've got to dish the brass linings each side. Now this is a dishing punch and it's put on the brass. It curls the brass over so as when it gets onto the buffalo horn and you get it riveted together, it creates an airtight seal. It makes it what we call pan into the buffalo scale, so as when your knife is made that you get a tight fit between the brass and the buffalo. These are the two scales I'm going to use for this particular knife. Now you can see where the colouring in this one is a little bit lighter and more marks in than this one. So I'd put a mark on that across. So I'm going to use this one as the best side, so I'll call that the mark side. So I put a cross on. And the other side of the knife, I put two lines running diagonal, which I know then that is the pile side, which is the back side of the knife. So when I pick the plate up to put onto the knife, I know that by looking at those, without sorting everything out, that I know with a cross on that I'm going to put the shield, which is that. I've got to have a shield inlaid, nameplate inlaid into the buffalo, so that I know the shield is going into that one with the cross on, which is the best side. Well, I'm going to put these parts that I've prepared into what we call points. Now the nickel silver rivets, actually what will be used to hold the knife together. They're the proper dimension for the holes. It's got to be tight in the brass like that. As you can see, it's got to drive down, but in the buffalo horn it's got to be very slack, like that. You've got to drill a hole the size in the buffalo larger than in the brass, due to the fact when you're riveting, with having a larger hole there, it allows the rivet to expand. It gives it a bit of play so it doesn't crack the buffalo. So I'm going to put them up together so that I can shape that buffalo down to the same size as the brass linings. So I'm going to put them up like that with the brass on the outer side. I knock the rivets down, one at each end. Now this is where the accuracy of drilling comes in. You see, it's driving down the brass, but it's not tight in the buffalo, which I've explained. Now as you can see, all those points are nice and straight, so you know you've drilled all the holes exactly right. Now I'm going to grind the shape of the brass to the buffalo on the power wheel. The next thing I need is a tool called a parsi. Now it's a long length of probably 1/4 inch rod, and on the end of the legs of the rod I make some cutting edges which go into the template I've made and revolve so that should be alright. Take it out of the vise. I then get a piece of nickel, the exact shape of the plate I'd cut out. Put it into the centre, just a slight tap, and it's positioned the shield in the inlay that I've cut out. Now I'm going to drill 2 little holes in each end of the shield plate, put a rivet through and rivet it in so that it can't fall out when I'm processing the shape of the buffalo. Spot of oil on. helps to ease its way through. Now the knife is more or less ready for assembly, so on the holes I've drilled in the buffalo I use a little countersinking tool that makes a countersink into the buffalo. So when I rivet it up, the rivets go into the countersink. This is the main rivet that's going to be holding the knife together. So I put it into the covering, which is, as you can see, nice and slack. And then that goes into the brass. You knock it down, nice and tight down the brass. You get your spring, look down it and make sure it's nice and straight. Once you look at that, you thread that onto the inside of the lining. Then you thread the other brass lining onto that. So you notice everything goes down nice and solid and tight. Just leave enough for riveting. Cut the pin off. Now that's ready for the blade assembly. So what I'm going to do now is mark what we call the blade tang. Strike it a blow with a hammer on top of the blade, and it puts a little indentation in the exact place where you want your drill to go. You've got to file that blade down to the tang of the whatever you've got for the exact pattern. You put it in the vise, and then you file the waste material off. All this part has got to be hardened and tempered, and the nail mark put in, and the maker's name across the tang there, and then it's ready for hardening and tempering. Now these are the final blades. They've all been polished all the way around, front edges, back squares, blade back, round ends, back squares, both the pen and pocket blades. Now is the final assembly. Now you put a little bit of spot of oil on the end of each blade. It acts as a lubricant because it's a moving part. It's like a car engine, a piston. It's got to have a bit of lubricant on because it's moving. So you put the pen blade in first. This is your rivet you're using, a nickel pin. You put it into the holes of the scales through the blade and knock the rivet down. You put your finger there because it's better to hit your finger than the buffalo. Then you cut the pin off again, leaving just that little bit. Knock the pen blade out, and as you can see that stands exactly right. Now to put the pressure on, put a little bit more oil on the pocket blade. You line it up with the hole in the buffalo, put it in between. Now you put it in the vise. Now this is forcing the spring back. Get your rivet and locate the hole in the tang. Cut the pin off again. That's perfect. The stance of the blades are exactly right. The pressure of the blade on the spring is exactly right. The points of the blade are dead inside the scale, leaving enough room to put your thumb to open it with the nail mark. And you can see with me pressing down on that blade, the tension against the spring, it means that it's landing on the kick and not on the blade edge. Same applies to the pen blade. The points are already in, nobody's going to catch themselves on it. The nail mark is being put in at the proper depth, because if it was too shallow, your thumbnail would slide out of it and it'd be slipping, you wouldn't be able to open it properly. That is now ready for riveting up properly. To make work properly, rivet it up. To rivet it up, you've got to use a little piece of metal called a witch. It's a little piece of metal with a V cut in, and you insert that in between the blade and the brass lining, so as when you're riveting up, you're not trapping the blade between the brass lining and the blade itself. It leaves a little space to manoeuvre properly. You're not trapping it all together. And you take it out and then finally give it a little extra tap to tighten it, but not enough to tighten the blade so that it can't move. Now, I've put the witch in, now I'm revving it gently. And after every few taps, I file that pinhead off, because it's work hardening it and it's stopping the revit being formed. So filing it gently a little bit more, it takes the harder surface off back down to the soft. And as you can see, the head is gently getting wider, and it's filling that countersink up. Now I think that's about enough for that side. Now turn the knife over and do the other side. Doing exactly the same thing. Gradually enlarging the rivet to fill the countersink up. I take the witch out, try the blades for its tightness. Now that has got a little bit too tight, so what I do then, I open it sideways on the steady, gentle tap, and it releases it. I do exactly the same thing to the other end, the penknife end. The pocket blade isn't falling to the side of the brass lining, because you've got to have it going over this way to create room for the pen blade to drop at the other side. In hardening, they tend sometimes to what we call twitter, and the move, as soon as it hits the oil when you're hardening, sometimes it moves either way. You cannot avoid that, but the thing what you do is use a setting hammer to bring that blade further over to the side of the brass. Now the pen blade is falling exact. It's right up against the scale, and the pen pocket blade drops exactly the other side of it. Now that knife is ready for the middle all wants riveting up now. Oh, that's lovely, that. That's ready for finishing off. Merge all that in now. I've took all the rough stuff off. There's all the rough marks in what that rough glaze has made. So I've got to use a smoother, this one, just to smooth it off a bit. Go on that, and go on a polishing dolly, put all the final shine on it.
Yes.
The handle's done then. This is a finished knife now. The blades are all polished and ready for wetting. Well, in proper terms, it's sharpening. So albeit the blades are polished, the knives all sides have been polished, and that's the finished article. That's all ready for wrapping up and dispatching off to some unlucky person.